Good morning, dear friends. Chesed Hashem, good morning. Good morning online, good morning in person. So, Chesed Hashem, as we're moving forward in these two texts, these introductory texts, to hopefully change the way that we experience life, the probability is that it will help. And I've spoken to a number of people, and Chesed Hashem, the responses of communication qualitatively are changing. So people are, so to speak, noticing changes within their lives, and that's it. It's a process, as Rabbi Nachman says. You need savlanus, you need tremendous rachamim, and you need tremendous patience. And for thousands of years being in exile, for thousands of years being being trained in a way that, so to speak, goes against culturally the Nakuda of Tzelem Elokim, which we knew that's part of the exile process. But this Nakuda of re-entering for the small groups of people who are interested in it. And again, this is a whole Nakuda as well. Can't speak to everyone in one go yet. However, what we can do is in our own Daladamos, work on our Midos, in our own Daladamos, try to understand these ideas. And try to understand them from an incredibly basic reality of how we function as a human being. And Tachlis, that's what we are trying to do here. We're trying to speak a language, showing us how the Tzelem Elokim is really the way the human being is destined to be. And it's a conversation, and there's layers upon layers, as Rabbi Nachman says, many a time. All of these are hagdamas within hagdamas. And it's not always straightforward. We have to think, we have to ask questions. But that's part of the Avodah. Part of the Avodah is to really have patience. To really have patience. There's a beautiful Medrash Rabbah in Vayikra. And the Medrash says on the Psukim of Yivarechecha Hashem V'yishmerecha, that Hashem Yisbarach gives us das so we can work with one another. Beautiful medrash, so we can work with one another. And really that's where we're up to. In our generation, things are changing, and there's this nakuda of what we call derech eretz kadma l'Torah, and we have to reintegrate into the derech eretz before another Vayikra Rabbah we receive a Torah Chadasha, which whatever that means. A Torah Chadasha could be this nakuda of having just a more deeper, elevated, expanded awareness of what's been there in front of us the whole time. We don't know necessarily what the Torah Chadasha is, but something will change in the mechanisms of how we work, and we'll be able to perceive differently. And that perception is going to be very, very good for us. And what we do know is that we have to do the hishtadlus to reintegrate. And this is something that we can forget, because we have to get used to, or we do get used to, not that we have to get used to, but we very much get used to where we are in our Zman, and we get caught up in what we have to deal with. And this is something very important. Rabbi Yosef Mashash, he writes, in order to have the ability to wield psak halacha, you need three things. Let's see if I remember the three things. Torah knowledge, you have to have the Torah knowledge, you have to have the das, and you have to know the zman and the people that you are working with. And it's very easy to forget the bigger picture because we have to deal with what's going on now. And it could be that what's going on now really becomes the loudest noise, the loudest sounds. Emergency here, emergency here, emergency. I was speaking a moment ago, based on what we were speaking last week, this inyan of Shashuei Olam Haba. Shashuei, as Rabbi Nachman speaks about in Tinyana Base, the Nakuda of Shashua is having the ability to move from side to side. Kain and Hevel, Hashem Yisbarach is speaking to the receiving of the Karbanos. Shashua, the same route, he turns here and he turns there. The Nakuda of Shashua is Ratza V'Shav, having the ability to turn quickly, Mati V'lo Mati. What are we saying is, it's easy to get locked in. When we get locked into something, it's very easy to lose the bearings of the bigger picture of what we're here to accomplish. And what we're trying to do here, Kapshuta, is we're trying to suggest a derech of Avodah that speaks to the individual, because in Yiddishkeit, the individual is very precious. The individual is so important, and the individual is incredibly precious. And the nation is very, very precious. The nation is incredibly important and incredibly, incredibly precious. Tiferes Yisrael. And we know Hashem Yisbarach gave Torah to a nation. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu not give Torah to Avraham, Yitzchak, to Yaakov, to Noach, to Adam? Maybe Adam, especially before Chet Adam, was the embodiment of Torah on all levels. Because Hashem Yisbarach is less interested in giving Torah to an individual and more interested in giving Torah to a nation. And that's part of the Messianic process. And we for ourselves have to re-receive the nationhood. But the nationhood can only come through strong, healthy individuals. And we'll speak a little bit about that today, because where we are in the text and where we're moving to in the text is very much about this bridge. It's very much about the bridge of the individual and the nation. And I would say that what we are going to speak is and I've mentioned these words before, and it's very easy to take them out of context. Everything I'm saying is very rational, and it's sequentially, humanistically logical. That means that if one really is misbainen, all human beings function this way. That's a claim that we're making. There's an neshama, ruach, and nefesh, and all human beings function this way. And if we look at the sources in Torah, Torah is speaking to this. And a lot of where Torah is trying to take us, Torah Avodah Gemilos Chasadim, it's working on taking us to this place. There's an expectation, as we mentioned, right at the beginning of Journey Begins, that the backdrop of how we're meant to be functioning with Torah Avodah Gemilos Chasadim is from what we call being a Baldas, a Balas Das. It's from that place. And hopefully we'll show some sources. We'll speak about this a little bit, because the individuality and the health of the individual is incredibly connected to the collective, to the nation. And when we're speaking about Geula and we're speaking about the unfolding redemption, there's some societies which, mamash, they feel they're doing it. And I'm often shocked, not to critique, but it's to just observe and point out that I'm sometimes shocked that different segments of societies that are speaking about a redemption language, they speak about the language of redemption, but the actuality, they're very far away from. And the derech, whether it was of the Gra, and then coming into the different hashkafas of growth-orientated Musa, Hasidus, whatever it may be, the presupposition is we're functioning from a certain place. And that's what we are speaking about. This Nakuda, we're functioning from a place of how we should be perceiving our world, where we should be perceiving our world from, to the best of our ability, and the recognition that for thousands of years we've been in exile, so at least start the conversation. The accomplishment of it is already a different conversation, but the cerebral conversation of where we should be functioning from, we should be speaking about. It's a chiyuv, we should be. Just to speak out these ideas, because it will make your life better, and more than that, your community, your family, your community, and society is going to function better. Simple principles that we repeat time and time again. This is something as a Hagdama, and as we do that as a Hagdama, just to thank Hakaras Hatov, the anonymous donor, Shativne Bais Neman B'Yisrael, the anonymous donor, Be'ezras Hashem, Shta Bracha, Mazel and Hatzlacha, and as well, just to take a moment, part of this experience of what we're trying to share here is not just cerebral, it's experiential, it's taking the whole gestalt of the human experience into consideration. It's taking all the different departments into consideration, the nefesh and all of its different elements, the ruach and all of its different elements, the neshama and all of its different elements. And whatever we know about it, we'll speak about and try to take into consideration. And we will do the best we can in the moment with the information that we have. We'll do the best we can in the moment with the state of consciousness that we are in. And this is a belief that we need to work with. This, by the way, idea is found in the Ramchal. It's found in the Ramchal that there's no such thing as not doing the best you can in the present moment after the fact. It's a very, very deep nakuda. So just take a moment and to change and transition. Wherever you've been before here, before now, we are creating a space where we can come in and recognize the space that we are in. Das Tachtoin Chitzoni. Just take note of the space that you are in and the people that you are with. And Das Tachtoin Pnimi, in a moment we'll shift into Das Tachtoin Pnimi after just noticing the tables and the chairs and the people and the lights and the color, how things are placed on the tables. Just to be with what's going on around us. And now to shift into Das Tachtoin Pnimi, from Das Tachtoin Chitzoni. Just to note, I'm in a body right now. And I'm feeling physical sensations. Just to be aware of that, to be aware of our emotions right now. And even to be aware of our thinking. I'm relating to the nefesh in the present moment, just to take into consideration the nefesh. And as we take into consideration the nefesh, the one thing is that something may come up to say hello, something may come up to visit, and there's a reality check of learning to hold it. There's a reality check of being aware of it. And that can happen inside of us, and that can happen outside of us as well. And with that, what we've said so far, we'll read up to where we are, and then I would like to just share a couple of sources to understand in context the importance of what we are talking about as bedrock for Torah and bedrock for the Geula Be'ezras Hashem. So what we have said is as following. A life lived from Das. The more we function from this place, the more divine light can flow through us. What is beyond Das? A more palpable experience of divine intelligence. Through being in a state, through being and living from the state of Das, we can start to touch our neshama, communicating to us through the baskol. This is the process of becoming an Adam Yashar, an aligned being, and it is good for all of us. Again, the nakuda, the shift, is the more that I can slow down and distinguish between the animalistic urges, which is not bad. It's the way we are. We need that as well. When Chazal took away the Yetzer Hara, bad things happen in the world. We need it. The term Ra, as we have shared before, doesn't necessarily just mean in our language bad. Ra means unintegrated. So there's a part of us that's unintegrated, and what we want is Tov, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov. The Yetzer Hara is the unintegrated parts of us, which need to be like this for us to function, but we have to be able to integrate it. So Yetzer Hara is the part of us that's unintegrated, that if it's not guided will lead to places, not because it's malicious, just because it's unintegrated and there's certain urges that we have. And what we want is to use the Yetzer HaTov to become a vehicle where we are guiding, as the Gra writes in Mishlei Perek 1, Pasuk 2, to use the Seichel to be manhig the Nefesh. That's what we want. This is what we become. We become an Adam Yashar. We become aligned. And what we said is more than that. Once we start to quieten down the inner voice, we can hear the baskol. We can hear the baskol. And that's something, again, a conversation. It's a conversation to be had. When people are living from this quiet consciousness, they describe an increasing experience of the following qualities: clarity, love, elegance, subtlety, stability, dynamic peace, intelligence, joy, happiness, resilience, creativity, bliss, and so much more. The more one lives from this place of Das, the more these experiences expand throughout every area of one's life. Those who cultivate Das in their lives seem to have a natural shine, as it says, Chochmas Adam Te'ir Panav. There's another pasuk as well, Chochmas Techiyah, that wisdom will give us life. And this wisdom is this nakuda relating to or tapping into it through Das. When we cultivate a life tethered to this place, we can become a being that is enlightened, or we become an enlightened being. Just to recognize this nakuda, as individuals, the more we can start to become aligned, the more that we can start to become yashar, which again, the Imre Noam, Yediya, Shmiya, and Re'iyah, yashar. Yediya is I'm in a state of das, Shiur, yashar, Shiur is Shmiya, I listen. I can listen to the sounds around me. I'm aware of the sounds around me. Re'iyah, I see. Through das, that's an akuda of das tachtoin chitzoni, leading into das tachtoin pnimi. And all the choices I make from this place typically will be better choices. What do I mean by better? They're choices that we could be more proud of than less proud of. We become deliberate practitioners of Bechira. Additionally, a side effect of living from this place is that negativity starts to recede. We start to experience less stress and anxiety, less lust, toxic shame, depression, sorrows, hate, and fear. These negative states of being can't exist in the light of true consciousness, because the light that flows through the soul from the Bara Olam is far more powerful than any negative energy. When we allow Ein Sof to flood our consciousness, when every fiber of our being absorbs and submits to the divine will, that our being becomes saturated with God light, and life is experienced completely differently. We enter a state called Moichin de Gadlus, a redemption mindset. And again, this nakuda, just to touch upon as we go forward, this nakuda is such an important nakuda that when we are working on ourselves and when we are becoming a deliberate, conscious practitioner of Midas Tovos, of really allowing ourselves to be in what we call a state of Devekus, coupled with Tikkun HaMidos, the natural consequence is that a lot of negativity diminishes in our life. So whereas it could be that somebody's still facing their fears, but when a person chooses to become more conscious, they realize there are people around them to support them, to help them. That's already a massive shift. A person can move from a state of denial to acceptance of where they are, even though they're still feeling icky, the ickiness of the experience. And that's something very important to think about. Sometimes we miss that out. Sometimes we forget the presuppositions of how a person came to healing. And all those presuppositions are so important. Really, really important when a person is in a situation and they can admit, they could be moider, and then they can tap into the resources around them. That's really powerful. That's part of the healing process. The community around us. Again, das tachtoin chitzoni. Das tachtoin pnimi, and then just acknowledging I've got people around me who, whether I believe it or not, and how much I believe it or not, but eventually a person can come through repetitive action of showing that I'm turning up. Sometimes a person can come to a state of vulnerability. The Pri Haaretz writes in Parashas Vayigash that when we're speaking about Vayigash, Yehuda, he comes close to Yosef, not knowing who Yosef is. What's the nakuda of Vayigash? Vayigash, he explains his vulnerability. He explains as vulnerability. And until now, Yehuda wasn't vulnerable. Yehuda was perceived, he perceived himself, they perceived themselves as shepherds, where really they're not shepherds. Really, this family is a family of kings and priests, a family of princes, and they're really, really powerful. And so much so, the Medrash tells us that Yehuda with his brothers said, Yosef, I'm going to come to you vulnerable, but vulnerable with strength. Vulnerability with strength. That means I'll be vulnerable because I feel there's an opening that until now you've played games with us. Every time we've met you, you've twisted and you've changed and you've done this and you've done that. Now I'm going to come vulnerable, but vulnerable with strength. I'm going to open up my heart with you. But that opening of the heart takes courage and takes strength. I want to tell you, on one hand, I'll be vulnerable, but on the other hand, you play games with me, I will single-handedly destroy your whole nation of Mitzrayim. I can do that. I have that strength. But it was premised with this deep vulnerability. That's what Vayigash is. Vayigash is he comes close and he becomes vulnerable. And until a person chooses to become vulnerable, they're not vulnerable. Until a person can choose to really open up and admit they for whatever reason they need to protect themselves, that's where they are.
It's like a black to white. There's not much of a gray there.
Yeah, there's no one to speak to. So this whole derech of avodah, I remember my teachers would tell me, this whole derech of avodah is a derech of avodah where you speak and you support and you could take somebody to a certain place and it's up to them to then drink from the water. The Maim Chaim, it's up to them. And we're living in a generation where there's this tremendous lack of self-esteem, a tremendous lack of not just self-esteem, but to have confidence. And we get mixed up. I think we may have said this before. The nakuda of das is relatable to the words in English, self-esteem. What is the nakuda of das? I don't need anything to feel whole. I could feel shalem without anything that I've accomplished. And all my accomplishments are a nakuda of nefesh. Nefesh is a nakuda of all my skills, my talents, my accomplishments. I need to have that confidence. That confidence is I need the levush of all my accomplishments. Yet, without my accomplishments, I'm still whole. So the nakuda of das and self-esteem is that I feel shalem just because I exist. I'm in a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that should be enough. And any flaws that we have shouldn't take away from my self-esteem if I'm working on anava and shiflas and being connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we need the nefesh, we need the confidence, all the skills, all the talents I've accomplished, all the well-dones that I've been receiving over my life. I'm so proud of you for doing such and such. We need all of that. But we shouldn't get mixed up. We shouldn't get mixed up. We should understand and distinguish confidence as das and self-esteem as confidence as nefesh and self-esteem as das. And what happens today, again, this is the major challenge. What happens today? These basic principles are missed in our education system. We're not learning a language. We're not learning a language of how we really, truly work. And it's no one's fault again. We've been in exile for such a long time. And being in exile for such a long time, Baruch Hashem, we're doing very, very well. Chazde Hashem, we're doing so well. Yet, we have to open up our eyes and our minds, and we're trying to have these conversations, and it's for you to think about that there's a next shift in who and what we are as individuals, as a nation, as a species. We were speaking yesterday about AI. And it's interesting just to point out that so many jobs to do with what people are doing now, there's going to be a massive shift in the next number of years. Because AI will be able to do, artificial intelligence will be able to do a tremendous amount of the jobs that people are doing now. This whole conversation, we spoke for about an hour and a half on this subject. I was asked to speak about this. So Nakuda is, what are we going to be doing when we have so much more time on our hands? America already is speaking about the major mental health crisis that they're not ready for. So many people won't have jobs, they'll be unemployed. What are they going to be doing? Because money and work has become so central in our life. Is he okay? Is he okay?
I know.
Okay. Money and work is so central in our life. And the question is, when we do not have the typical way we use money, referred to the Gemara in Sota, where we speak about in Sota how people won't have prutot in their pocket. We're going through a lot of these changes right now as we speak. Well, what are we going to do about it? Are we having those conversations? Well, these are these conversations. These are these conversations. The realignment process that we're speaking about is a forecasting of where humanity is going. We spoke in another shiur yesterday about this nakuda of mental health. Mental health, in the early days of psychology, it was very cerebral. Then, over the years, it became more emotional, and now it's very much embodied. The world of the somatic world of healing. because there is this subconscious humanistic realignment, because it's in the DNA of our species. It's in the DNA of our species. Are we forecasting enough? Are we having the conversations that we need to be having in a healthy way? How many people are studying right now? I teach in several yeshivas, and some of the gap yeshivas, or the modern Orthodox yeshivas, there's a strong pride in going to university and studying. And this is good, pseudo, nothing, chalil v'chas, nothing negative against that. But the question I ask, and the question I'm deliberate about asking a lot of the chevra when they are going to university and studying 4, 5, 6 years, just take into consideration, is it going to be a situation where in a couple of years' time, the job that you have trained for is now not going to be a manageable job for a human being, and it'll be far easier for some sort of, less qualified person who knows to use the computer and to check it. So, for example, I'll give you examples. There's right now 3, 4 people I'm working with that over the last number of months we've been trying to at least have these conversations to keep their jobs. So, for example, one person who does medical billing. So when they write up what they write up, so it used to be until a couple of years ago, everything was online with a computer, and they sat with a computer, and they had paperwork that they had to print out, and it took good few hours to get what they needed done, and it was done by a human being. Couldn't be done any other way. Today they're working with programs where you put in the information and you can get certain medical billing that they were doing done instead of maybe 20, 30 minutes in about 5 to 6 minutes. So if this person did not learn to use what's out there, they would have been fired. They wouldn't have a job now. Or for example, certain lawyers, where this is another incident, certain lawyers that are specific in papers that they write, contracts that they write, and whereas once upon a time they were paid the big bucks to sit and to look through and pick up on language, so they're using programs, AI programs that do this within literally minutes. So what do you do with that? Do you give up? Or do you recognize, no, actually for thousands of years, we've been living a certain way and there's a change, a shift that's happening. So what jobs will be left? That's not for now, but the question is a real question. And as B'nai Yisrael, these are things that we are to be speaking about. This is part of our tradition. Part of our tradition. You can read words on pages, and it could just be cerebral. It could just be cerebral, or it could be brought down to actuality. A person could go with the Etzemach David Avdecha, where there's a natural unfolding, but we need the Boineh Yerushalayim. Some people are more Boineh, some people are more Etzemach David Avdecha. And there's a balancing act that's needed. And there's conversations to be had. How is the world going to look? And as I said, for Am Yisrael, we are a group of people. We are a group of people that should be conscientious of the whole species, the whole world. We should care for the whole world. Conscious, cosmic carers of reality. That's B'nai Yisrael. That's what B'nai Yisrael should be. Conscious, cosmic carers of all of reality. Just as Hashem does that, we have to do that as well. But that's a shift, moving from a exile mind shift to a redemption mind shift. And it's not easy because it's the first time in a very, very long time we've really had the ability to do this. And there's a lot of layers of what we call trauma, a lot of layers to get through. But this is the language of healing we're speaking. The journey begins, an awakening, and recognizing that the intellect is so important. The intellect is such an important tool, and it's not it, there's something more. Now, when you have to leave the intellect, because we're saying that what do we say last time? We said that the intellect can't grasp godliness. That's not negating the intellect. That is saying that the Nakuda of Tfisa, there's other dimensions of your experience The intellect is part of the experience, and we are etching into a territory that we can't necessarily hold. We can't necessarily fully understand, because by definition, it's, so to speak, moving out of the system that we are ragil to. And with that, we're moving out of feeling that control, safe, secure, and certain. We need to tap in to other midos, that sometimes those muscles aren't strong enough. The midah of vulnerability. The midah of vulnerability, which we can translate maybe as bittul. Bittul is vulnerability, the deepest levels of vulnerability. To be vulnerable, you have to be so secure in who and what you are. To be vulnerable, you have to know that I am a baldas, and I have a nefesh, and if something backfires, rejection, or something is misheard, I can get hurt. But what and where is that hurt coming from? That hurt's coming from my nefesh, my thought, feelings, and physical sensations. And in the way life is, we get hurt. Sometimes we may experience rejection. Sometimes we may experience mistakes. We make mistakes. Sometimes we could be very conscious and make mistakes. So what do we do with it? Sometimes we're faced with big changes from a humanistic perspective. We're going through that now. So what do we do with that? Do we give up? No. We have to do cheshbon and nefesh, and we have to grow, and we have to become more, and that's what we are meant to be doing. We are a nation of hope. We are a nation of caring. We are a nation of being smart about it, thinking, knowing how to critically think. And this is this nakuda of das, living from this place of das. Let's go back into the text now. Depending on your level of awakening, all or some of these negative traits leave and fall away. What is profound is that at times they lift away without even trying. As we put the effort of becoming more awake, it is not that you become tired of life or start to find work meaningless, or that you become numb to life or your physical reality. You actually have far more energy, clarity, enjoyment in doing all the things that you do, no matter how small or how great. Savasari Vash, we're going to go into this in a moment. But what we're saying here is that sometimes people think living from a place of das, living with healthy self-esteem, das, and I'm living from a place of hishtavus. Hishtavus is that I can suspend and hold judgment. I'm not going to be so... what's the word competition? What's the word competitive? I'm not going to be so competitive. Things will become numb. No. Because the whole nakuda is the reason we're here is to make life meaningful. And people ask this question, what's the meaning of life? And I think we may have shared this before. People ask, what's the meaning of life? That's a lesser question than how can I make life more meaningful? I'm never going to figure out what the meaning of life is. That's very abstract. That's non-das. A das question, das with nefesh, is how can I make life more meaningful? And what we want when you realize that you make the difference, when you realize as an individual you make the difference, you are the game changer of our reality. When you chab that, when you chab how powerful you are, when you chab how precious you are, when you chab how strong you are as an individual, your wanting is, how can I care more? How can I take more radical responsibility? How can I make this world a beautiful, special place? How can I better people's lives? That's what becoming a baldas in a Torah way does. It's what it does to you. That's what should happen. That's what should happen. We have this, it's interesting. Once upon a time, we know with tefillah, for example, I have opened a couple of nakudas. We'll just bring this in a little bit. So you have Torah Avodah Gimilos Chasadim. So we know, for example, when we're speaking about Torah Avodah Gimilos Chasadim, there are sources with Torah Avodah Gimilos Chasadim that we need das to enter the world of tefillah. We need das to enter the world of Torah, and we need das to enter the world of chesed. So, for example, I remember, speaking out a lot of these inyanim with the Biala Rebbe in Avodas Halev of Shmiras Hadas by one of his relatives, his great uncle. The Mechaber writes in his Soros HaTfilah Zayin, Haish Yisraeli tzarich lahasim bedasoi koidem atfilah, and he goes on to explain that two things. Number one, you need to enter das. You need to enter a state of das, shavisi, as you daven. And through that, then as you daven, your davening will be that much more powerful. Why? Kapshutai, very, very simply. Because when you're davening, this is what we were speaking a little bit about last week with davening. When you're davening, what we are doing is we're drawing down HaKadosh Baruch Hu's words that the Anshe Knesset HaGadola wrote Baruch HaKodesh in this neat, beautiful book called the Siddur, which developed over time, as we know. And what we're doing, we're saying consciously, das, dibur with das, Lukutei halachas das, daled, Lukutei halachas das, daled, that I'm speaking consciously these words, and I'm massaging these words into my nefesh. I'm reminding my nefesh, listen to these words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because this is tikkun amidos. When we are properly davening, it's tikkun amidos, but I don't just daven by myself. I daven with a minyan, that this is our mission statement. And as we daven, we are wanting to code that message of the Anshe Knesset HaGadola within us. That makes a change within self, which makes a change within the minyan, which makes a change within the nefesh. That if you look at davening, pretty much most of davening, especially Shema and Amida, is so nationalistic, mitzad, how we are meant to function as a nation.
Also
Aleinu as well. It's how we're meant to function. All through tefillah, but especially Shema and Amida, Bainei Yerushalayim, Shema Koleinu, and Etzamach David Avdecha. All of these are about our nation and about society. It's about society. And as we function from a place of das as an individual, with the mission statement of tefillah, which is avodah shebalev, we're meant to emotionalize. We're meant to emotionalize this. What is a belief? We can say that from Rabbi Yisrael Salant, that I heard from Rabbi Yitzchak Grudzinski, who heard from his father, Toras Avram. What's a belief? A belief is an emotionalized thought. That's what a belief is, an emotionalized thought. So when a person has a thought and they emotionalize it, it becomes sticky, it becomes strong. That becomes an emunah. So we, through Tikkun Hamidos, want to choose how we, number one, select and associate our experiences, but we want to choose as well what thoughts we are emotionalizing. Are the thoughts that we are emotionalizing helping us become a decent member of society? Are the thoughts that we are emotionalizing, are they allowing us and leading us to become more loving, wholesome, respectful, strong? Where are our emotionalized thoughts taking us? And when we're davening, we want to emotionalize. We want to get into it emotionally and repeat the words 3 times a day. To emotionalize the thoughts in order to live well. What's Torah? Torah is the background, Torah is the intellect, Torah is the refining of the mind. Obviously it's to do with Devekus as well. But whereas the world of tefillah is a deep experience of emotionalizing thoughts, the Nakuda of Torah is recognizing what those thoughts are, so to speak. The backdrop, having deep conversations, nutritious conversations with the different halakim of Torah to really create for us the ability to think deliberately, to cultivate the thinking and to have the knowledge of what we should be thinking about. And the practice of just thinking because it's good to think. And especially when you understand how Hashem's found in the Torah. So there's parts of Torah which for you does not make sense. But it's not about you, it's about the relationship. Every relationship, there's boundaries. So Hashem said, I want you to learn my Torah. I'm in the Torah, I want you to learn Torah. So I'm not learning Torah for me to understand everything. Correct, there's parts of Torah which for sure are very much about How can I come to understand the practices that I have to practice every day? That's one aspect of Torah. But there's another aspect of Torah, which I'm learning Torah because every relationship has boundaries. And in every relationship, and if it's a loving relationship, a respectful relationship, there are do's and don'ts in the relationship. I may not understand why that person doesn't want me to do that. But if you're in a relationship, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to understand. You have to be obedient. Is the relationship worth it? Sometimes a person, because the relationship is precious, they may say something to you that's painful. But if the relationship is precious, you will say, I care more about the relationship than the pain that I may feel in this moment because maybe I've missed something or done something wrong.
And it also goes the other way, is that if Chas v'Shalom, a good friend, but Daat was looking to do something that was out of bounds from the Torah perspective, it would be painful, but in that case you'd have to do the exact opposite. You'd have to distance yourself from the person.
It could be, yes, if that's what the halacha dictated. So I'm in a relationship with divine intelligence. And Hashem told me what, so to speak, Hashem likes and what Hashem dislikes. And I may not always understand it, and that's part of Limud HaTorah as well. But that's healthy, because that's how humanistic relationships work. There's no difference. People think it's different, but there's no difference. It's the same set of rules. There's the mechanism and there's the content. Same set of rules. So when we're living from this place of das, and we are entering tefillah from a state of das, how we are meant to be. In regards to Torah, we're meant to be entering das. We're meant to be entering Limud HaTorah from a place of das. It's interesting because, as we know, I wanted to just share a couple of points here before we go into the last section here. But just to listen to this, because again, we're speaking about this nukuda of the individual and the nation. So we know, for example, this is just from a kuntrus, it's a list of makoros, to be honest, which speaks, it's about the nakuda of das and then different elements of our way of being. So for example, the importance of das, Mishlei 3:6, in all your ways you should know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then in Mishlei it's full of it. Gemara Nadarim 41, if a person has das, what do they lack? And no person is considered poor if they have das, but if a person lacks das, they're considered truly poor. If, for example, a Talmud Chacham, Vayikra Rabba Aleph, a Talmud Chacham who has das and a Vela is better than them. So there's other, like for example, many places, but the nakuda that I wanted to share is that why is it that in regards to Torah, Avodah Gemilos Chasadim, das is connected to each one, tefillah, you have to prepare yourself, Limud HaTorah, because we can abuse, without das, we can abuse Torah, Avodah Gemilos Chasadim. We can abuse it. We can very, very much abuse it. So a Talmud Chacham without das, and a Vela is like them. This is as well a whole subject of what Das Torah is, because there's a presupposition that the person who is wielding the koach of Torah has Das. Presupposition. But again, as we said, it's something that we need to be educated into. The Ikar of Adam is Das Torah Savram, L'Kutei Maran in several places. We've got all of these rich makoros, and these shiurim aren't going into the makoros purposefully, because it's more about the experience. But I just wanted to take a moment just to deeply understand that when we're speaking about das, we're speaking about Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, which we're about to go into in this last paragraph, when we're speaking about the mission statement of really humanity, to come back from the world of Chet Adam to Tikkun Adam. If we don't adopt this way of living, we are very much missing a lot of who and what we should be, and we're missing how to get there. So for example, many places, the wherever you want to go, Toldos Yankov Yosef says it very, very clearly, Parashas Vayishlach, that just as we left Mitzrayim and we had to become Balei Das in order to receive the Torah and move forward in life. So too, at the end of our 6,000-year journey, if Moshiach hasn't come, one important nakuda is we have the Torah, but we have to bring Das consciousness around. Degel in Parshas Bo says something incredibly similar. Moranayim, this is from the world of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Nakuda is, the Gra writes exactly the same. The Gra writes the same. Many places, the Gra writes that if a person does not have das, they can't be metaken their midos, and if they can't be metaken their midos, how are they meant to megale HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and how are they meant to bring around the Geula? So the redemption is very much connected to this. And we've spoken about the qualities of das. And this nakuda, the qualities of das that we've spoken about are qualities of observation, separation, and connection. And there are other qualities as well. But what we are speaking about is incredibly important. Incredibly important. And it's very, very important for the redemption process. Those people who learn Rav Kook, the writings of Rav Kook are a little bit tricky. For one reason, he was incredibly poetic, and especially in the world of Rav Kook that people typically learn, the Makars aren't always brought, and it's not always so straightforward. So one has to have a tradition. One has to have a tradition in, number one, understanding where Rav Kook is coming from and how to read Rav Kook. So Baruch Hashem, when I first came to Eretz Yisrael to study in yeshiva, there were still many Talmidim of Rav Kook still alive. There's still one Talmud of Rav Kook who's alive today, Baruch Hashem, but there are many Talmidim who are alive, and you sit with them and they give you the maftechas to understand Rav Kook. There's a background for the foreground of reading the writings of Rav Kook. And it's very easy, if a person misses that, they miss really the whole, I wouldn't say the whole point, because people typically who learn Rav Kook become more loving about the land, and they become more loving about the nation. We just finished, for example, Maimah Hadar. A few weeks ago, we finished a kuntras by Rav Kook, a paper on Rav Kook called Maimah Hadar. And if you understand the background, what we're speaking about here, Rav Kook speaking about, Baalei Das. He writes in the first parak using slightly different language. That the poison, the illness that we experience today is an illness of our thinking, an illness of our das. Like he writes it, he's using the language. So this nakuda of the forwarding of redemption, the bridging of the individual and the nation, taking the whole gestalt into consideration, again, this term I'm using, bridging, comes from das. Because das is the bridge, ruach is the bridge. Ruach is the bridge between the neshama and the nefesh. Das is the bridge between the higher consciousness and the animal soul. Das is the bridge, it's the vehicle to open up to be B'nai Torah or to remain in the Nefesh HaBahami. Adam, as we have said, is Das, as we said, Ruach is Adam. And these ideas that we're sharing are very plausible ideas to help the redemption process. Very, very plausible ideas to help the redemption process. And, if somebody, for example, if you speak about the world of the Baal Shem Tov, in Savas Rivash, one of the mamash, the primary yisaidus is Hishtavus, Savas Rivash, base, that we want to be beings where we are in a state of Hishtavus, and especially speaking to what we just mentioned here in the text, that whether it's something big or whether it's something small, in our coding, the Baal Shem Tov writes, Heilige Baal Shem Tov, that it's a mitzvah kala or it's a mitzvah zahir. Like if it's, he's saying something so deep that it doesn't matter. It's your nefesh that codes if something is great or small. It's your nefesh that does that. But when you're functioning from a place of das, and he writes here at the end of this Keta, Perek Aleph Beis, that the Rachmana Libabei, and then he goes into Gimel, Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, Hishtavus, that when you are functioning from a place of das, you have the availability to open up your heart, and whatever is in front of you, you meet it 1,000%. Whatever is in front of you, you can meet it 1,000%. So it doesn't matter if it's big or small. It's not about the outside. It's about the inside and how I'm dealing with it. So I can be in front of something and it may appear very, very, very small. But from a state of das, it doesn't make a difference. My incarnation is my curriculum. My incarnation is my curriculum. And let's just finish this. Let's finish this paragraph. In addition to the decrease in negative experiences and increase in positive ones, another shift described by the Balei Das is what we call hishtavus. It's what we call hishtavus, a form of equanimity in which all is welcome, recognizing the stillness and the perfection underlying all things, and the experiences allow a person to accept everything that happens with grace and trust, as described in Tehillim 16:8, Shavisi Hashem lenegdi tamid. Again, I through das and hishtavus is very much connected. When I am more in a state of das, and I have the availability to, number one, look out at the world from a cleaner place, and at least to ask the question, am I now coloring too much what I'm seeing? At least ask the question. I know that I look out at the world with and from my nefesh. So how much am I doing that? How much right now is my nefesh dirtying the way I'm looking at the world? It could be I turn around and say, it is, but I can't change that right now. Could be. Person's honest. Again, we're not talking about good, bad, right, wrong. We're talking about the human experience. Or a person may say, you know what, right now I'm listening to you, but I'm being very judgmental. What does judgmental mean? Judgmental means in either a positive way or a negative way. I'm looking or I'm listening too much, too thickly from my lens. Let me take a message. Let me take a minute to go for a walk. Let me take a minute to breathe. And then let me listen to what you have to say again from a quieter inner place. Let me be able to just listen to the words you are saying. The words hishtavus and shavisi are derived from the root shin, vav, hey, shave, equal, to make equal. All manifestations of that will, regardless of how it affects us individually, in all ways, in this way, whatever happens, we can hold and contain it without falling or crumbling. We may experience far less trauma, if any. So what starts to happen, again, just to say this outside, the reading is breaking down now. Okay, so again, that's the whole nakuda as well. Hishtavus and das, right now I'm in a state of das, and I'm in a state of hishtavus. So once upon a time I wasn't. So for example, that would have happened, and I'm listening to myself read, and I'm hearing it's not flowing. So I would then have had hirhurim regesh rigshe gufani, which let's call collectively the nefesh. The nefesh would have started to tell me a story. No one's understanding you. Like, shut up, you can't read so well, be quiet, don't even try. And it was only because of my teachers, the Biala Rebbe, who encouraged me and said, okay, so if you experience that, you'll be around people who can take over from you if needs be, and you can be around people who will support you. You don't have to hide. You can have the nakuda of das, which this is what it is. The kli is slightly dysfunctional at times, and you could laugh. And it took time. However, the reality check is today I'm pretty good at it. If I have to, I wish, like there's certain nakudas which my nefesh is very broken-hearted about. I'd love to give a daf yomi. If I gave a daf yomi, it would be gewaldig. Shulchan Aruch, it'd be gewaldig. It'd be really good, really, really good. Poshet like Chumash Ra, it would be amazing. It really would be, because I love learning it and I have many good ideas and stories. Pretty much most of the Shulchan Aruch, especially Orach Chaim, have stories that I've asked on pretty much every din with different tzaddikim, and it'd be amazing. And the fact is, right now in this incarnation, it hasn't happened yet. I got brachas for other things that were difficult. So what do you do with it? So you have to find your koiches ha-nefesh. But again, koiches ha-nefesh. But the more that we realize, whatever we feed becomes stronger, and whatever we feed becomes stronger, and whatever is louder grabs our attention. So make it good midos. Make it good experiences. And the truth is, the truth is very reasonable to say. Again, very reasonable to say because we don't want to create false equations. The truth is very reasonable to say that by experiencing life from this place, Das, we can choose to live from a place of encouragement and strength. So, when we live from this place of Das, we started off by saying how we can flow better. We flow, we're in flow. And then the second paragraph speaks about what people seemingly experience, even if it's for a moment. And then we went into explaining that what starts to happen is that there's a natural reduction in a lot of unhealthy, unwanted experiences. Why? Because I'm starting to realize, 1 minute, I'm not my narrative, my biography is not my destiny, the thoughts coming up, hi thoughts, how are you doing? And if you want to be more sophisticated, based on drushes, for example, from the Arizal in the beginning of Birchas HaShachar, which I don't know if it actually fits there for whatever reason, but the Nakuda is that we carry multi-generational voices within us. So maybe that's not us. So our avoda is what? To hear the voice and to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you, tikkunim. That voice is coming to be noticed. That voice, that feeling, that physical sensations, the nefesh experience is giving us multi-generational work to do. My incarnation is my curriculum. In the present moment, I can bring up, or I can, whatever comes up, not I bring up, but whatever comes up, I can hold it. And I could be more compassionate, as Rabbi Nachman says. This is an akudah, be compassionate on your guf. That means on your nefesh. And then we went into this nakuda of how when you live with Das, you live from this place and you work on it. Tikkun hamidais. What starts to happen is we can then really tap into the first halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, Shavisi Hashem lenegdi tamid, the midos of the tzaddikim. We mentioned as well, which is very important, this nakuda of Torah avodah gimlos chasadim needs to be done through Das, and we can understand why. We can understand it needs to be done through Das, but it will help us become more balei Das. So, as we shift into next week's paragraph, social coherence, what we just spoke about now, sequentially, and just to end here, is that we said that the beginning paragraph of a tuning, when we look out at the world, we can cerebrally recognize that there is a sequence of recognizing the world I look out at has layers. And we used the nakuda of science to show that underneath what I see with my eyes, there's so much more. And we spoke about that going beneath, because it's very easy to miss, it's very easy to skip. And we constantly want to bring around, as we said educationally, the steps in order to get there. Then we spoke about how it's in our inheritance to be balei das. Torah was given to a nation who came out of Mitzrayim. And we had 40 years to what? To become Bnei Das. In Mitzrayim, we were very much stuck in the Nefesh HaBahami. And then the Mitzrayim journey we see is coming out of the Koitz Ruach to a place of Adam, to a place of Ruach, to a place of Das. Then we were Makabel the Torah. And we know, the Ohev Yisrael, Parshas Bo, tells us that this cycle is going to happen again. It's where we are now in our time period. Then we went into the fact, which is a little bit scary, but the nakuda pshuta is the intellect cannot fully grasp godliness. That when we speak about this nakuda, no thought, Tikkun Zara 17a, no thought can grasp you. That this is a reality check, and it's a little bit scary. Why is it a little bit scary? Because we are now moving out of what we think we can control. We're moving out of feeling safe, secure, and certain, and it takes tremendous courage, and it takes vulnerability. Now, until here, we've been speaking about the self. We're now moving into living from a place of das. Speaking about the self is good for us. Hishtavus is good for us. But it's good for us for another reason as well. Because we're here not to live as individuals. We're here to live as a nation. We're here to live together. To experience, we call the term achdus. We're here to live a life where we can contribute and collaborate. We can work together. If we're functioning from nefesh, it's very difficult to do so. If we are functioning unhealthy from nefesh, it's very difficult to do so. If we're functioning from das, then already it becomes a glorious journey. And just to end with something that we've shared before, the way you relate to somebody from a place of das is that you are quiet, and stage one is you can cleanly listen to their narrative. You can hear where they're coming from. And again, their story, their narrative, no matter how opposite to what you think, their narrative, their story is coming from nefesh. But we're here to respect it. We're here to validate it. Not validate that it's right, but to listen to the person. And when that person speaks and you are listening without interruption, unless you're reflecting, that energy is going to become more and more mitigated. And most people walk around. And they've never really been seen and heard. They've never really been seen and heard. And I mentioned the story by the Pilsner Rav, Rabbi Singer. He called it Baal Shem Tov listening. I remember many a time he would listen to somebody and the person speaking would speak and speak and speak and speak, and Rabbi Singer would just listen and listen and listen. And I would ask, I said, Zaidi, when they walked out the room, they said, oh my gosh, a nace, a miracle, I feel so much different, everything is okay. And I'm like looking, it's like, what the heck is going on here? You spoke for like 2 hours and Zaidi listened. I asked Zaidi, I said, Vustisti, what are you doing? What are you doing when you're doing this? And he said, I had a kavanah. I want you to speak so I can listen. I want you to speak so I can get to know you. I want you to speak so you can hear yourself. I want you to speak so you can let go of all of that negative energy or all of that confusing energy. That was the avodah of listening. And then Rabbi Singer would reflect back. So 1 minute, this is what I heard. Is this correct? And at the end he would reflect back. And he would say, do you feel you've been heard? Do you feel you've been listened to? It's a davar amok ma'od. And typically when a group of people can function like this, obviously we're shifting in from the exile mentality to the redemption mentality. And it's there for us. It takes effort. It takes sincerity, it takes a lot of courage. It's not difficult, it does take a lot of courage. So Be'ezras Hashem, we finished this chapter today. And then next week we'll go into this chapter, social coherence, and hopefully the shift that your redemption is the redemption. Your healing is the healing. And we should go from strength to strength. Take a moment. What did you hear today? What spoke to you today? And then we will break up into our groups and Be'ezras Hashem share key things that you've heard today and reflect upon them. And don't try so hard. As I've said before, don't try so hard. Let this wash over you. If you don't remember any of it, it's okay. It's okay. It really is. And that's a conversation within itself, but that's what we have to say today. L'chaim tovim u'l'shalom, dear friends, may we all go from strength to strength. Bracha, mazel, and hatzlacha.